Now to Canada, where thousands of international students have taken to the streets across Canada. The demonstration has been on in the last 1 week over new immigration policies introduced by the government of Canada. According to a report by a local media, approximately 70,000 students hit major provinces, including Prince Edward Island, Ontario, Manitoba, and British Columbia. The protest came in response to a series of immigration reforms that have left many international students fearing deportation. Nigerians studying in Canada are reported to be one of the highest immigrants after India. Now we have joining us from Canada a Nigerian journalist based in Canada, Agogo Obo, who will bring us up to speed with development there. Good to have you join us.
Good to have you joining also. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, absolutely. I can hear you. One of the reasons also they have given for these new immigration policies is that it is taking a toll on jobs and housing. I wanted to speak on that just broadly before we get into how this concerns Nigerians. Great. So you're right. It's a multifaceted approach in trying to understand exactly how this policy happened. But more of housing rather than jobs, because recent surveys done here seems to suggest that Canadians are less interested in the jobs being taken by foreigners. In fact, most of the jobs being taken by immigrants, jobs most Canadians will most likely not get involved with. But more with housing. Housing is rent and purchase of housing is done by more than 50% in the past 2-3 years. So it has a lot more to do with housing. So you've had over 1 million national students coming to Canada in the last 5-6 years. And apparently, mainly Ontario province has more of those numbers in that. More than 9% of them did not make provision for the housing for the students while they came in. And most of the students, I'm sure, like we found out, haven't left after they finished schooling. So it's put a lot of pressure on housing. And, how they're going to go about it, especially with the election coming up next year, is also adding to the dynamics of the bigger debate around immigration. Let's play up the data, because when you look at the number of students in Canada, just by the visas that have been issued, it is a lot. Between January and June in 2023, 18,000 Canadian study permits were issued to Nigerians. That's just January to June. And we're also the highest immigrants after India. We see that Canada's fastest growing international student population is also Nigerians. And when you look at the entire population, what does this mean, or the implication of this for Nigerian students?
Well, it's interesting you play those side by side with India, even though the Indians have a lion's share of those numbers. Between 2016 till date, they've got over 1 million international students. Numbers suggest closer to 900,000 Indians before you even have Nigerian numbers. Maybe in terms of increase of proportion year by year, you probably would have a rise. But, beginning from this year, when the policy was announced and the Trudeau government began to feel and generally the regional government began to feel the push from people saying that it's unsustainable, the numbers. So people aren't necessarily upset with the numbers of people coming in terms of, temporary work permit and all of that. What they're concerned is how it's affecting their day-to-day living, the cost of groceries, the cost of housing especially, and then the stress on the infrastructure. So they've already made up their mind going up to 2026. They're going to cut down those numbers, at least 50%. One point which isn't talked about more is the coordination between the federal system of government. So we've had the colleges and the universities go into this sort of decisions to, people have said it's a money grab, especially with international students, without necessarily providing the facilities and infrastructure in the provinces they are going to be schooling in. So I think going forward, from the discussions that have been happening between the federal and the regional and municipal government, is to ensure that before any school brings in any student into the country, they will have to answer the questions of where they're going to stay, where they're going to work, and all of those questions which previously hadn't been answered. So it's something to think about in terms of regional planning going forward.
And when you travel, immigration is one end of it. People immigrate just so that they can also integrate. But when you look at what's happening in the UK right now, there is a drop in revenue from Nigerian students because of the policies, and UK universities are suffering for that. Do you also see that becoming the case in Canada if this immigration policy, if they go through with it?
Interestingly, a number of colleges, I think the leadership of many of the colleges did kind of letter to, I think it was Doug Ford, who is the regional head here in Ontario. And they sort of said, look, if this goes on, it's going to affect not just the revenue for the schools and possibly see them having to fold up a number of those colleges. It's also going to affect the workforce because many of the jobs around here depend on the student population who are given temporary work permit, and then they can fill up a lot of those positions. But it's also another argument saying that instead of the workforce growing, horizontally in terms of skills and in terms of earnings, it's getting worse because people are having to earn far lower than they should have. Because if you're going to employ someone and you can pay him far less than what you would pay someone who's gone to university, and then it's a capitalist society, so they're built and they're driven basically by reducing the cost of operations and maximizing profits. So they've I've talked about that also too. But like I said, it's an election year coming, and in terms of approval ratings, the federal government is facing a huge problem. I mean, most of the problems
absolutely
immigration, they're not supposed to bear the burden for.
Immigration is a big issue in the UK, in the US, and in Canada as well. Right. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure we'll continue to talk to you as this issue progresses. Nigerian journalist based